I'm Teresa Bailey, host of In the Money. On today's show, we're talking about how working with a financial professional can help you stay focused on your family and your future while navigating the complex legal and emotional landscape of divorce. According to Candace Barr and Janita Wall, founders of the National Divorce Information Workshop Second Saturday, there are 4 divorces every minute in the United States. That's 2.4 million divorces per year. The process of divorce can hurt families both emotionally as well as financially. As family law attorneys are burdened with more and more complexities around technology, child care, and the ever-evolving legal environment, their ability to help you with your financial situation may be limited. Joining us today is Kathy Williams, a certified divorce financial analyst and principal of Waddell & Associates. Kathy is going to share with us her thoughts on the 2 most important areas to focus on during a divorce: your budget and your balance sheet. Stay tuned as we sit down to chat with Kathy Williams.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Today we're discussing the difficult topic of divorce and why working with a financial professional could make the process much easier. Joining us is certified divorce financial analyst Kathy Williams. Well, thank you for joining us today, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, before we begin, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Waddell & Associates every day.
So I've been with Waddell & Associates for 27 years, a long time. I am a financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst. So I take care of clients. I help them with their investments. I help them plan for the future. I help them with their children's plans, just pretty much anything that a client might need, financially speaking, and sometimes counseling. That comes with the job. Additionally, I'm also help out with the technology, so it's kind of that's an unfortunate byproduct of having been there so long.
You wear many hats.
Many hats.
And I noticed on your resume many doodads. So how many certifications and specialized areas do you work in?
So I'm a certified financial planner, so that allows me to do all of the financial planning. A certified divorce financial analyst, which is a designation that gives me specialties in the divorce financial side, so that whenever I'm dealing with clients that are going through a divorce, I can let them know of pitfalls or great things that may happen that are pertaining to the divorce side. I'm a National Social Security advisor, which is just something that says I know something about Social Security, though I don't think that the people at Social Security actually really know it themselves. So it's as much as they produce that we can see. And then, you know, that's for the business side of it. That's the majority of them. I used to hold a lot of licenses, but at the Waddell & Associates, we don't have to have the same licenses that you do at broker-dealers. So those went by the wayside many years ago.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the divorce education and training that you've had. What was different about that training than the standard financial planning training?
The divorce planning very specifically is teaching you about the effects of division, of asset division in the marriage, tax versus, you know, non-taxable, that type. It talks about what it's going to look like to run 2 households as opposed to 1 with generally the same amount of income or assets that you had. It will give you the ability to learn and to project what will happen with certain alimony or child support. Boy, that just went by the wayside there. So it will. We can
income
flows, things like that. How will that affect the household, and how we can help them, you know, figure out the best way to get back to work, to do whatever. So we learned how to project from beginning to end of the divorce process, and then that syncs up with what we do with the clients after post-divorce when it comes to the financial planning side.
What about the legal side of divorce? Do you learn much about what the family law attorneys are dealing with and how to work with them ongoing with the client?
So the law side of it is very scary, and it's changing a lot, and there's a lot of negotiation that comes with the legal side of it. So you would think that you would be able to open a book that says, well, if you've been married X number of years, then you're going to get X. Mm-hmm. Well, and that doesn't happen. Every divorce is different. Every attorney handles it differently. The needs of the family are different in every scenario, so there is no one size fits all. So that's been the most interesting part of working with the attorneys, is seeing what their style is, seeing what they like to have in their arsenal and what they like to come up with for their clients.
Now, what do you handle that's different than the family law attorney?
So we do super in-depth on the financial side. For example, if there is a curiosity as to whether there was a dissipation of assets during the marriage.
I'll pause because that's a big word.
Okay.
Dissipation of assets for the viewer.
For the viewer, that means that one party had money and spent money without knowledge of the other party in the marriage, and so if there is the theory that the money was spent on something that wasn't for the benefit of the marriage, then it's something that could theoretically need to be brought back in to the marital balance sheet, which I think you said we'll talk about in a little while. And so, so if we needed to, we have culled through, I have many times culled through bank statements, credit card statements and such to try and find certain types of spending that may be consequential in that type of situation for a particular client.
So in that role, you're a little bit of a detective.
Yes, we are definitely can be a very big detective. We're also advocates, super advocates for, while the attorney is the advocate for getting the best settlement for the client, we're the advocate for helping the client understand why that's the best settlement and how they can make the best use of that settlement for their new life as a single person.
So speaking of settlement, the marital balance sheet, which you brought up, how is that normally used in settlement, and what does it look like for a client to use a marital balance sheet?
Well, when you are going through a divorce, it's very important that you understand what everybody owns, both the debt and the assets. And so the marital balance sheet actually will list everything that's out there that either party owns. It will list the residence, and if there's any equity in it. It will list all retirement plans, pension plans, assets that are held outside if you have a second home. It's the cars, it's the debt, the credit card debt. So anything that has been touched, either outflows or inflows, things that have been purchased during the marital time period, during the marriage, is what's considered a marital asset or liability, and it's put onto a sheet so that you can see what the actual marital estate looks like. And that's a starting point for negotiations on how assets or liabilities would be divided.
So it's a full inventory of everything for both parties.
Absolutely.
And it becomes sort of a template for negotiations to begin.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so we also use that for when you're dividing. You know, the idea is, well, everybody gets 50-50 and you just walk out the door and that's it. But it's much more complex than that. And so we have to use it as far as tax purposes, non-tax purposes. It's a way for us to be able to go in and figure out what is the ideal split of the assets, and that gives us a clean base to start with.
Well, I definitely want to come back to this in just a second.
Perfect.
We have to take a quick break. We have to take a short break, and we'll be back in a moment with Kathy. Stay with us.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made her college years happen. Opening that education savings account when she was little. Spearheading a campus tour. And another, and another, and another, and another. Bam! Deciphering financial aid. She was like, what? But now she's like, yeah! you aced planning for college. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
So there you are, shuffling through a stack of resumes and you come to mine. This is it, first impression, my way in. But can my resume show you how I truly stand out? Like that I was studying, going to night school while working 2 jobs just to help my parents pay for groceries. Or being the first one to always step up. No, that's something you just can't put on paper. Look beyond the resume and discover new ways to develop great talent that is dedicated, hardworking, and determined like me.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to In the Money. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the topic of dollars and divorce. Today we're joined by divorce financial planner Kathy Williams with Waddell & Associates. Thanks again for being here with us,
Absolutely.
Kathy.
Glad to be here.
Divorce is a difficult conversation to have, so I appreciate you helping our viewers hash out if they're contemplating or going through a divorce, the details
Absolutely.
that they need to know, especially with a financial person. So we were talking about marital balance sheet, and we were beginning to sort of walk through all of the assets and the debt on a marital balance sheet. Where do you see the most things missed on a marital balance sheet? The little details or ways in which you coming aboard to a case sort of, you find the little things and play detective?
So it's very important to think of every asset. It's very easy to say if I get a statement from a brokerage firm or from a 401k plan, that's an asset. But there are a lot of other assets that people may not realize that is something that should be included in the marital balance sheet. Stock options would be one. The frequent flyer miles, which can be if you have someone in your family, one of the parties that does a lot of traveling and has built up a lot of travel miles, that's a very valuable thing to be split because that helps provide for travel later on for a particular person. So there's a lot of little things like that we like to cull through whenever we're looking at client statements. Their information about their business, their work information. So there's just a lot of detective work that we like to go through and ask questions to see if we can't unearth more things.
Now, if the client owns a business, does that show up on the marital balance sheet?
It does, but that is a very, very difficult thing to have on the marital balance sheet. When it becomes a small privately held company, you really have to hire someone who is certified and an expert in doing business valuations. But there would be a line item on the marital balance sheet for a business valuation that would be considered divisible.
Now, is that part of the services that you offer, business valuation?
We do not offer that. It's very, very complicated and you have to get deep into the books of the company. So there are several good ones in town and we would always refer to those people that do it all the time.
So that would be a specialist that would additionally need to come onto the team.
Absolutely.
What do you see the biggest arguments over on the marital balance sheet?
Oh, well, I think that the big argument will come over house. The house is always a big deal, especially if there is someone who has raised a family in the house and has very emotional attachments to it. It's generally a very large asset for the particular couple. Whether it's paid for in full or paid for partially, it still is a large asset. And so we have to help the clients maneuver through the fact, does it make sense to keep the house? Does it not make sense to keep the house? Who should? Can you afford to keep the house? That's a big, big issue because especially not if you've been a stay-at-home mom or dad and you have not been a participant in the workforce, but you've been the person taking care of the home, you may have a great love for it and can't imagine the idea of parting with it. However, if it's a large home and you can't afford it, then it doesn't make fiscal sense for you to try and keep the house. So having to negotiate that process with the clients, I think is one of the more difficult ones that we go through.
So that is a process that you walk through with your clients on, can I afford this home I love or should I let it go?
Absolutely.
I imagine that's a very difficult conversation to have.
Tremendously so, especially if the children are still young and living in the house.
Well, let's go ahead and move from the balance sheet. There's tons, I'm sure, that we could talk about in that subject. But let's talk a little bit about everyone's favorite word, budget.
Well, budget is my favorite word,
Yes.
and it is nobody else's favorite word, I can promise you that. But I like to assure everyone that whether you make $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year or $2 million a year, you need a budget. If you have no idea what it costs for you to live, what it costs for you to eat, shelter, drive, insurance, if you have no idea what that costs you, then you cannot make any plans about what the future is going to be like. So it's imperative to understand what the budget is. And the budget is everything that you spend, but it's not that simple. You have to have...
It's not that simple?
It's not that simple. That's not that simple. So in our world, we craft this great word called discretionary and this other one called non-discretionary. Mm-hmm. Non-discretionary expenses are those that you have to have. So you have to have a place to live and pay for it. You have to have a car. You have to have insurance on the car. You have to have food. You have to have shelter. So these are the things that you are required to have. The non-discretionary, which a lot of people would argue whether these are non-discretionary, would be travel, entertainment, eating out, Orpheum tickets, whatever the case may be. It's super important that you understand that, because when it comes to deciding what the split is going to look like and what the funds are going to look like, you have to totally understand what it is. We know what you want to live on, but what is it that you need to have in order to live? And those can be greatly apart.
Now, do discretionary expenses just get cut then in a divorce? You just get rid of them?
No, absolutely not. You basically would prioritize what your discretionary expenses are. And then, so, you know, if you've got $10 billion, you know, it's not going to be an issue. Jeff Bezos, no issue at all with that. But the issue will become if you can only afford, if you make $5,000 and you can only afford $3,000 and you want to spend $6,000, there's a very big disconnect there. So you have to be able to know where you can cut and still be able to survive.
So categorize in order to cut
Absolutely.
more efficiently. Well, we're definitely going to come back to this.
Okay.
We have to take another short break. We'll be right back with Kathy.
See on page 4 that the projections need to be tornado next Thursday.
Seriously? Thursday? Can't do that.
This is really inconvenient.
I have yoga that day. I have no time for this. So.
I can't do Thursday, but I can do Friday.
Disasters don't plan ahead. You can. Talk to your loved ones about how you're going to be ready in an emergency. Don't wait. Communicate.
This is the story of a boy who is very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. It made him feel uncomfortable. One day, he found out he had something called autism. His family got him help, and slowly, he learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to In the Money. We're talking with Kathy Williams about the process of financial planning during a divorce. Now, Kathy, when we left off,
I'll take that one too. I'll answer to that.
We were talking about expenses. I definitely want to make sure we cover income sources today. So the big three I do want to make sure we cover are pension income in a divorce, Social Security income in a divorce,
correct,
and alimony. So I'll leave it to you where you want to begin.
So it depends upon the age as far as the hierarchy of the importance of this income source. So let's talk about Social Security first, because that's got, you know, kind of interesting things for both. One of the things that the government actually did right whenever they came up with Social Security was to say that if a couple has been married at least 10 years and there haven't been, you know, future marriages can have an effect on it, but let's just say you've been married 10 years, you're entitled to receive a portion, a spousal benefit from your ex-spouse. When I first heard that, I got very excited. I was 20, figured that I had maybe 5 10-year periods in me. So if I married 5 different men, spent 10 years with each of them, by the time I'm 70, I would get 5 Social Security incomes.
So crafty of you.
Love that idea. So depressed when I found out that wasn't true. But interestingly, I could have 5 different men drawing off of my Social Security. So they'll only pay one benefit to each person. But it's interesting how they'll do that. So it's nice to know that if you've never been working, if you have stayed at home and taken care of the family, you have access to Social Security benefits via a divorce, as long as certain requirements are met.
So I want to go back to the 5 and 10 and all that. So what, if I understand correctly, then you can have multiple people draw on your record.
Correct.
So if you're married 5 times, all of those spouses can draw on your record.
As long as the marriage lasted at least 10 years, and they meet the qualifications of not having remarried before a certain age.
However, if you had that many different spouses, then you only get to choose one of the 5 to draw from.
Correct. Or my own. So whichever. But the theory is I'm not working during that time period. So
understood, understood. So whichever is higher. So what? How is the calculation? Do you get their full benefit, half of it?
No, you get. And again, this is very generic, and there's a lot of caveats to this case by case. But if you can draw an ex-spousal benefit, then you're entitled to 50% of your ex-spouse's PIA, which is their full retirement benefit, and then of course if you take it early, you do get reductions for taking it early. Now if they happen to die, then you actually would be considered a spouse. An ex-spouse is the same thing as a widow in this particular case. You're the same type of widow, assuming you have not remarried, as the current widow. No, we're going to say women and men, so I'm just going to say me.
Okay.
If I have been married to someone and I divorce them, and then they get remarried, and so when I'm drawing half benefit because I'm the ex-spouse, well, upon his death, I would be entitled to receive his full benefit. Additionally, his current spouse would be entitled to receive his full benefit.
Now, does that happen automatically, or do you have to know and go back to Social Security and ask for it?
Well, I have had clients where they have had it happen automatically. However, I think it's always a good idea to talk to Social Security and make sure they're on it.
So that is not something you have to revisit your attorney to take care of?
Absolutely not.
That's good.
Absolutely not.
So let's move into pension now.
Yes.
If you go through a divorce and either you or your spouse have a pension, how is that handled?
So if we're talking about a pension as in monthly payments, as opposed to, so the terms of pensions, profit sharings, you can have pension benefits, defined benefit plans, defined contribution plans that have dollar values attached to them that you can split just as you can 401k plans. When you have an actual pension plan that's based upon your length of service, your number of years, and you get a certain value monthly benefit after you retire, those can also be split. Let me say that military pensions have their own way of handling it, but there is a legal process where that you can, based upon your length of marriage and the time that you were married while you were employed with this particular company, that you are able to receive a portion of the pension benefit that would be payable to your ex-spouse.
Okay, so that would be the income source. Now,
correct.
If the divorce happens while the couple is still fairly young, can a value be placed on that future income and put on the marital balance sheet?
It absolutely can. It absolutely can be. In that particular case, and again, when you're that young, you really don't want to have to wait, 30 years before you receive that benefit. So you can do a calculation. It's called a present value calculation of a future flow. And so that can be put on the balance sheet and can be offset by other assets.
So basically, you would give the pension owner spouse the full pension benefit.
Correct.
and the non-pension owner spouse would get some other asset
Correct.
in exchange.
Whether it's more of, the house proceeds or more of a 401k plan.
So quickly, before we're done, this has just flown by.
I know, it's been unbelievable. There is so much to talk about.
Let's talk about alimony.
Yes.
The biggest gray area and tax changes, and there's a lot going on with alimony right now.
Well, and this definitely falls back to, I wish that there was something written somewhere that says this is what alimony is. It's the number of years times this times this. It's not like that. In the state of Tennessee, for sure, there has to be a need for alimony, and there also has to be the ability to pay alimony. So just because you get divorced does not mean you automatically get alimony. Either side does. In the past, up through December 31st of 2018, in most cases, the person that paid the alimony was able to deduct the alimony off on their tax return, which was very beneficial. The idea behind that is that you pass the taxes off to the spouse, which would, by default, be the lesser income person. And that was more beneficial in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the government, for the family need. So as of December 31st or January the 1st of 2019, now alimony payments are not deductible by the payor, nor are they taxed to the payee.
Wow.
So it's a totally different set of circumstances. So if in fact you're in the higher, tax bracket and you're the one paying, you no longer get the tax break. The person receiving it, who is in theory the lower income tax bracket, doesn't have any income to pay tax on. So it's
we could talk alimony
for days,
for many of these shows, but we've got just a few seconds left. What is the biggest mistake you've seen financially in divorce when someone doesn't use a divorce financial planning specialist?
The biggest mistake that I have seen is when someone was willing to spend $20,000 in attorney fees to get $3,000 in a benefit. It's the biggest mistake, which is more of an emotional, coming from anger place, but it is huge. And
so for you, it's much more about the emotional state maybe than just the numbers.
Oh, I believe so. I believe any time, if you are logically with the numbers, then you understand that it doesn't make sense to spend $20,000 to get $3,000. But if you are emotionally angry, want to get back at the ex-spouse, then that's a way that you can do it. But you only end up hurting yourself because you're depleting the assets in the marital estate. So it doesn't really help anybody.
So part counselor, part analyst.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Today we discussed how working with a financial planning professional trained in the aspects of divorce can help you find comfort in the details of your financial future as you navigate the process. We also learned that adding a certified divorce financial analyst like Kathy to your divorce team can help both you and your attorney. That's all the time we have today. Thanks to Kathy Williams with Waddell & Associates, and thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more shows, follow us on YouTube or Facebook at Germantown Municipal Television. You can also view our website at gmtvonline.org. Each person's financial situation is unique. Before making any decisions, please speak to a financial professional to see if our discussions today are in your best interest. We'll see you next month. I'm Teresa Bailey, and now you are in the money.